Well, it's you could basically just look at when you breathe in, and I don't want to get overly deep on this, too scientific, but when you breathe in, your lungs pull down, so that's a skeletal muscle called your diaphragm that connects all the way down onto your pelvic floor. So when you breathe, now the pelvic floor is the base of the core. So that's the base of the core. So when you breathe in, you're literally starting to integrate or to activate the base of your core. When you exhale, that diaphragm actually releases. And as it releases, there's a chain of muscles that create this like symphony of engagement that's going to engage your core as all the air leaves your lungs. Now, if you don't breathe correctly, right, or you're not very conscious of your breathing, then you're actually not going to notice that, and you're not going to activate your core. Now, as both of you guys know, I just give guys really, really simple exercises, really simple movements where they're able to concentrate. So that's meditation. And to where they're able to experience how the breathing is actually activating their core. Derek, it's so cool to be here, man. It's always good to see you too, Lar.
It's good to see you, man. It's been a while, and I'm excited for all good things for you this year. We're in the holiday spirit and season.
Yes, we are.
Let's do this. It's good to have you back on the show.
Mm-hmm.
As I understand from Derek, this is going to be potential regular occurrence, Johnny. You're OG.
He's already
GTY.
A regular occurrence.
Yeah,
that's right. OG GTY, I think we're calling it, right?
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. We are. We're the OG of guys talking yoga, right?
Yeah, and we're here to talk about the next Empowered Way workshop.
This is another trip around the sun. We're coming up around on the second Empowered Man at Kripalu. Johnny, what's
well, I'm stoked. I mean, both of you guys were there. You guys were both there for the first one, and it was a pretty rad event, and a lot of really cool dudes showed up. I feel like it was a complete success. So it's like, let's go round two. Let's do it again. And the way that I always roll is I'm always better the second time around, third time, fourth time, because it's just the way I live my life. I just keep trying to work on improving, getting better. And so I'm stoked.
Johnny, what do you got planned?
Before we go there, I was curious, Johnny, thoughts on how the first one went and the nuggets that you loved and really resonated with you from what you planned and what came out of the first one.
Well, I think the first one, I didn't really necessarily have any expectations, but it definitely exceeded any expectations I could have really had. Just because the guys that showed up, it was for real. Everybody was interested in getting into yoga or deepening their understanding of yoga, also seeing the connection with the gym and meditation. I'm not a foo-foo guy, so it really wasn't a foo-foo event, which I just thought let the guys that showed up kind of really dropped in. And there's just a shit ton of authenticity there. And it just led to just a lot of really good connection, and it definitely inspired me to want to keep doing it again, and to keep trying to get guys practicing yoga.
Yeah, I think, Derek, you can attest to the fact that, like, the makeup of this group ran the gamut. Totally. Certainly demographic, certainly in age demographic, and most specifically in yoga practice demographic, right? I mean, there were some complete newbies.
Yep.
I remember some guys saying, like, I had no idea what this thing was. My wife or partner, whoever, told me to go on the website and check this thing out, or I was just on the site and thought, that looks pretty cool, all the way up to folks that have been practicing a lot. But it never felt like there was a huge disconnect in that gap, right? Everybody was they did what they could do. And you and Tim were, right there guiding us through.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of practicing yoga. And for me, teaching yoga is I can have somebody in the room that's been practicing for 25 years, and then I can have somebody right next to them who's brand new. And the person who's been doing it for 25 years is able to get what they need to get out of the practice. And the person that's new is just right there alongside them, just kind of getting what they need to get. And it's a beautiful, I mean, that's really, I mean, anybody that's practiced yoga, they know that that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what's the vision
100%.
for this year? What are you thinking?
I think that I'm going to follow somewhat in the same schedule, but I'm just kind of refining everything that we did to involve a little bit more preparation for what happens when you leave a weekend retreat. Like, when you go to a yoga studio, and trying to give people, the guys, a little more intel into that, and then on top of that, um, also doing a little more work. You guys would know because you were there, but a little bit more work standing. We did a lot of what I call the groundwork, which is really essential for like spinal health and hip opening and all of that stuff. But I need to spend a little bit more time being able to kind of grease the wheels and when we stand up, and with that. And the other thing that I want to really help guys with is, when you come to a retreat and you're kind of buying in for a weekend experience, I think that there's there's some things that you really want to get, and it's the beginning of the year, and maybe some things that you're trying to change in your lifestyle. And so I've got a couple cool exercises planned to help guys kind of dial that in a little bit, with what is it that they want to take home from the retreat, and then being able to create some kind of more of a community touch, a little more touch, which we are doing through the WhatsApp. But just trying to create a little bit more touch, because then that helps support you as you're continuing to practice yoga and make changes in your life.
Johnny, when you've got a group that big who comes in and there's a range of ability, do you adjust or modify a little bit for who's in the room, for the duration of things you do, the kinds of things you do that might be in your plan or a little bit outside your plan? Tell us a little bit about how you just execute a retreat knowing that there's so many variables at play.
Well, I mean, that's such a great question, Derek. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I always really like to start down on the ground where everybody's lying on their back, because then it really helps with, just the human tendency to think people are judging you and being self-conscious. And then once I can get people moving on their back, get them a little bit more comfortable, get their nervous system to be a little less nervous, calm down, then I can do a pretty fair assessment of physicality and abilities without anybody even really knowing it. And then I can kind of pivot from there. So yeah, it's a lot like, it's a lot just like being a coach in a sports during a game. I mean, you gotta stay on your toes, and you gotta kind of look at the field, and you gotta say, okay, how am I going to make adjustments? How am I going to shift here for who shows up and what we're doing? And as you guys know, I mean, there is a wide variety of guys, and anybody who's a half decent teacher or skilled teacher is really good at that. So I like to think I'm half decent at that.
And just to be clear for anyone listening, we're talking about January 31st to February 2nd, 2025. You can go to the Kripalu.org website and just look up the Way of the Empowered Man. First of all, if you haven't been to Kripalu, I know Derek and I have covered it before, but incredible place, phenomenal meals, beautiful setting, very monk-like in a lot of ways. You're really separate from a lot of things. And, I know one of the things you committed to, Johnny, while we were up there that weekend, I tried a little bit to connect to this or to commit to this, was detaching from devices. I think we all tried to make that commitment that weekend, the first night, to put the phones away, or maybe just choose one time in the day to check in. And you can, if you commit to that, you can really detach up there, and find some space in your brain.
Unless your HVAC has crapped out in the middle of a heat wave. That's
right.
with an infant and newborn. And
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's It's
I
hard.
should throw the caveat. I should
Mm.
throw the caveat, Derek and Johnny, that like, assuming there aren't any more pipes freezing at Kripalu, this is the weekend, January
is the
31st.
weekend.
This is going to
Right,
happen. If
right.
not, then we might be back in June.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a heck of a weekend, man. I know, again, Derek and I have talked about it a lot. And you know, the stuff on the back is really, really powerful.
Mm.
We talked about it with Tim in an episode that will be, if it hasn't come out, it will be coming out soon. And just, you know, that shoulder work and the arm work and the core work really does help set you up for when we finally got on our feet. And I think one of the great pieces of that weekend for me that you introduced was a lot of the functional movement stuff.
Yeah.
And really thinking about that stuff, that was super powerful. So I'm imagining you're going to keep that base in there. And then when
Yes.
you talk about getting up on our feet, are you talking about more of a flow style yoga type thing that you're going to add in?
Well, I mean, you know, and a lot of it just deals with my background. So, you know, a lot of the groundwork that you wind up doing, and it's and this is like where movement science and where yoga science are really kind of intersecting. And so, you know, it's what's called dynamic neuromuscular stability. So it's basically the progression of a baby being on their back, on their belly, up on their hands and knees, crawling, and you know, and we're not doing baby movements, but we're doing movements that are working on developing a stronger neurological connection with the body and the brain. And then once you stand up, just like a baby stands up, then really the human body is designed to be working in a chain like fashion from the foot to the leg to the pelvis to the spine to the arms. And so yoga so beautifully can kind of work on that fluidity and that orchestration. But also the part that, you know, I really enjoy sharing is like, then how does this work in the gym? Like, how does it work with, you know, how do I do a bench? You know, how do I push correctly? How do I pull correctly? Like, what do I need to be doing for, you know, my legs and my hips and my spine in the gym that are going to help not only enhance my yoga practice, but help me age with a sense of grace and dignity and maybe hit the golf ball a little bit better without back pain. And so, you know, it's like that's the whole progression. So it really fits really well into a yoga model, but it's also very much so an exercise science and a fitness and strength and conditioning model as well. So you know, that I think the whole weekend, the idea of progressing from the ground and then building up and involving, you know, how does yoga fit into the gym and how does the gym fit into yoga, and then how does all of this whole thing fit into a man's lifestyle, and what does a man need to do to be able to maintain his health. And I think a lot of guys are kind of like somewhat like in the dark about this. And I meet them every day.
Absolutely.
And I meet them every day, and I'm constantly trying to help guys out when it comes to their health.
Johnny, if you had to highlight the two or three things that are common that these guys struggle with, whether they realize it or not, from a fitness, you know, physiology standpoint, what would be those two or three things that you just see as a repeat pattern across all these guys?
I would say from a physical perspective, how much the way that you're breathing is impacting pain and your inability to really fire your core correctly. I would say that that's a big one for guys. And the second one I would say for guys is the not really understanding how the strength in their feet is impacting their hip mobility, right, and their posture, and really and their shoulder function. A lot of guys, you know, those are just like the problem areas. It's like tight hips, you know, their lower backs, and then shoulders. I mean, shoulders are, I think that's the most injured place for guys in the gym and in yoga. It's just shoulders. And it's not, as you guys both know, it's not like just trying to stretch out your shoulders or your hips.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a much more sophisticated way of doing this that I think I just kind of boil it down and make it really simple.
So Johnny, on the shoulder, where guys have rotator cuff issues and they're doing the same exercises all the time.
Yeah.
How does the foot from the ground up really support getting better shoulder health?
So when you start to understand just like super basic, simple biomechanics, it's just the human body is, it's a high rise building. And so, when you look at a high-rise building, what the most important part is going to be basically the concrete foundation that's built upon, and then so you look at the feet, and then it's really in conjunction with how are the feet working with the legs and the hips and the spine. And there's very, very specific movements that can very much easily dovetail into yoga. And even some of them are yoga and some of them are functional movements that can start to get guys to be able to actually feel the connection from their feet, their legs, their hips, their spine, and their shoulders. And it's really wild, as both of you guys know, because all of a sudden, like we've done a bunch of work with your feet, your legs, and your hips. And then you stand up and I have you move your arms and you're like, my shoulders are looser. What the hell just happened? And it's like, because it's just like everything is building from the ground up. What's great is that all of this stuff is now starting to become a little bit more like household information. And when I first started talking about this stuff 25 years ago, it was not household information. And then, I mean, any guy that's serious about golf, I mean, they're all talking about the ground up. Every golfer is talking about the feet. So it's like, so it's starting to pervade, more our culture, and people are starting to understand it. But understanding from a conceptual standpoint is one thing. You got to experience it. You got to experience it, because then once you experience, you can own it. And once you own it, right, then it's yours.
Yep. Yep. So breathing, you mentioned that first. Where do you think most folks miss, particularly guys, about breathing and breathing mechanics?
I would just say overall, just the importance of it, and it's how it's affecting everything from pelvic floor health to spinal health to mental health. And so I think that's a big one. And just, the big mistakes are, chest breathing, mouth breathing, and just short breathing, and just how it winds up affecting, it creates more anxiety. It just throws the nervous system when you don't learn how to breathe correctly, which is really kind of quite simple to experience and understand. It just starts to impact the neurological system, which impacts every single system in the body.
Yep.
So, just spending some time learning how to breathe in a non-threatening, non-judgmental environment where you're lying on your back is a game changer.
Yep. How does
go ahead. Sorry, I was going to say, like, and breathing deeply, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, or 7 seconds, whatever you choose to do for that amount of time, for 3 hours. I mean, you feel unbelievably great.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was like a bath of goodness after each session, and of course after the whole weekend. So that's a big part of it. Yeah. And you sleep great. Yeah, for sure.
So Johnny, how does breath work help strengthen the core once someone's aware of how the mechanics of breathing are working with the core?
Well, it's you could basically just look at when you breathe in, and I don't want to get overly deep on this, too scientific, but when you breathe in, your lungs pull down. So that's a skeletal muscle called your diaphragm that connects all the way down onto your pelvic floor. So when you breathe, now the pelvic floor is the base of the core. So that's the base of the core. So when you breathe in, you're literally starting to integrate or to activate the base of your core. When you exhale, that diaphragm actually releases. And as it releases, there's a chain of muscles that create this like symphony of engagement that's going to engage your core as all the air leaves your lungs. Now, if you don't breathe correctly, right, or you're not very conscious of your breathing, then you're actually not going to notice that, and you're not going to activate your core. Now, as both of you guys know, I just give people guys really, really simple exercises, really simple movements where they're able to concentrate. So that's meditation, and to where they're able to experience how the breathing is actually activating their core. And then we could get into things like prostate health, which is just like vitally important. And then if you want to make sure you keep your prostate strong, you got to keep your pelvic floor strong, which means you have to learn how to breathe correctly. And then just how much that starts to impact your psychology, your sleep, as both of you guys experienced it. And then there's a whole nother skill set that can arise within learning how to move your body in a more efficient manner. Whether it's in the gym, whether it's on a yoga mat, whether it's on the golf course, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. It's good stuff.
Johnny, for retreats for guys, I know we hit this the first time last year, but again, what makes retreats a unique opportunity for men to really jumpstart their practice?
Yeah. Well,
or evolve their practice.
Yeah. For you, when I don't necessarily, just to kind of keep this like, again, just really simple, is if you're going to dive into something and you just go take an hour-long class, which is great, so you're going to get a certain, you're going to kind of scratch the surface. But when you go away on a weekend and you have no distractions and you got a bunch of other guys around, kind of like locker room, because that's kind of the environment that I try to kind of create, right? Just kind of really, really kind of, down to earth. And you get a bunch of guys together to be able to dive into this stuff. And you're just getting a lot more repetitions. You're getting a lot of education. You're getting a lot of connection with some other dudes, right? And then you're getting the experience of practicing something and dosing it. And then, so what happens is, and this is a very neuroscience thing. So you're getting these repetitions are what's going to create more of a potential shift within your neurological system. So when you leave the weekend, you're actually leaving with a different neurological system. You're not going to get that in taking a class. Now, if you go to a really good studio and you got a really good teacher and you go every day, right, then you're going to get that over time. But when you go in a weekend and you wind up getting some pretty, over a 30, let's face it, it starts on a Friday night at 6:00. And then by 12 o'clock, you're driving home. And you're going to get about over that, you're going to get, 12 to 15 hours of listening, of connecting, of practicing these movements and experiencing, right, what it is that I'm trying to share with men, which I think is a life-changing thing. And then you're literally leaving with a different neurological pattern in your brain and your body. That's a very powerful experience.
Yeah.
And you're doing it with a group.
Yes.
And you're all in it together.
Yes.
And you're all sharing your experience. And you're in a plank. And you look at the dude next to you.
Yeah.
Right? And you give that look with each other. And you're like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing to come out of, because then you go to lunch or you go to dinner or breakfast, and you're trading stories about what you've learned and this and that. And it's amazing. I also just want to say about the weekend, because there's a lot of guys out there like, I can't afford go away on a retreat. My wife's not going to buy me doing that spend. I just want to be clear. Like, it starts at basically $299. And then you decide at Kripalu that what adjusts the price after that is your lodging. So if you want to go super fancy, you're going to come in over $1,200. If you want to go super Spartan, you could be at like $600.
Right.
And so it's doable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't go and buy pizza and Starbucks for about 2 months, you can afford this no problem and get a hell of a lot more out of it
Right.
than you would at pizza and Starbucks, right? So they make it affordable. If we can switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about empowered wellness and what you've built there. You've got an app and the studio, where the studio is located, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
for people just who want to find you?
Yeah, no, we're down in the Wilmington, Delaware area, and this year we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. The studio itself has been around, in the area for 22 years, but I started, or 23 years, but I started the fitness business, which eventually gave birth to the yoga studio, which eventually gave birth to the wellness business, 25 years ago. And just we do an array of things there. We have Empowered Yoga, which is our yoga brand that we've been developing, which has a lot of art, but there's a lot of science in there because of my background in exercise science. And then we do a lot of balanced athlete stuff, which is basically a functional fitness methodology and a program. And then we do a lot of health coaching, and then we have an app, and we do have classes on there, and other educational offerings that are on there. And that's about it, man. I'm moving into my 30th year of teaching, and I'm stoked. I'm on fire, and I'm and I just look at every day. It's just it's an honor to be able to share my experience with people, and to continually feel like I'm actually making a difference in people's lives. It pumps my soul.
Well, that's a good segue, because we're recording this little interview in the tail end of December, just before Christmas and New Year's. And as you come into this year, I think you just said your 30th year.
Yeah.
What are you looking to do or change, or what's on Johnny Gillespie's radar for this year?
Personal or business?
Yeah, but let's take them both.
I would say personal. Just continue to this. It's this whole thing of just, if you're not uncomfortable with who you were a year ago, you're not growing. And so I even just started making a couple shifts in my life over like the last 2 or 3 weeks, that because I'm like, I'm just not even waiting till New Year's, because I love the New Year's thing. I love the idea of like new year, new you. I love the resolution thing. That started like 20 some years, almost 20, 25, no, almost 30 years ago, with just not doing the dry January, which eventually just turned into me not drinking. I quit drinking altogether like 4 years ago. And I think that kind of built towards it. And so this year, I'm really trying to zoom in on my sleeping. I'm really, which is, it's a work in progress, because a lot of it is about just trying to get to bed earlier and carve out the right practices before getting to bed. With my training, I want to just keep doing what I'm doing, but just improving what I'm doing. And with my nutrition, I want to make sure that I continually keep moving the needle the way I'm moving the needle with my nutrition. And most of it just deals with just continuing to clean up just stuff that I'm eating that's poor. And then in my personal life, just keep getting closer with my wife and my kids and the people that I work with and our employees. We just had a really good year. I was able to give people some nice bonuses, which makes me feel really, really good. And I'd like to be able to do that again next year. So
That's awesome.
yeah. But for a yogi, New Year's is every day, and resolutions are something we do every day, right? For a yogi, for a true yogi, that's the deal. But I like joining in with the rest of society in the beginning of the year, and then I like to I think it's fun. It's fun, and it's exciting to invite possibilities and hope. What about you two lads? What do you guys got going on for the
Derek?
Yeah, listen, for me, I think with still having an infant at home,
Yeah.
I think getting sleep is probably the number one thing for me. And it's amazing how much just a tiny bit of alcohol just blows up the whole night of sleep. So if I'm only going to get like 5 or 6 hours of quality sleep, they better be the best 6 hours I can get. So I think for me, it's really staying focused on being as healthy and as present as possible. And knowing that it takes a lot of energy with a family. So that's going to be my big focus. As far as, business wise and opportunities outside of family, I think, Larry and I have a lot of ideas and plans for the podcast.
Yeah.
This is a place for yoga, for community and resources. And we just want to see more guys getting into yoga
Yep.
and figuring out a way that works for them, how they do it, when they do it, where they do it. And that's sort of the mission. And we believe in it. It's amazing, Johnny, how many great guys we've met through this podcast.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, I'll say, a lot of them come from Empowered Wellness.
Yeah.
A lot of good dudes in the Johnnyverse. So thank you for making all those intros.
Absolutely.
Totally, man. Thank you. Yeah. And I think, I echo a bunch of what Derek said. I've got a 9-year-old, so I'm in a different part of the kids cycle. And he's on and ready all the time. So it's,
Right.
It's getting sleep, getting enough sleep. I think the biggest thing for me is my food intake and cleaning that up a lot. I joke with my acupuncturist because I'm in the car a lot. And I joke with her that I don't eat fast food, but I eat food fast. So I'm eating in the car while I'm driving, even if it's a salad, it's like, I got my knees on the steering wheel going down this fucking sawmill and I'm shoving a salad in my mouth. Like that's not healthy,
Yeah.
So it's really kind of taking care of those things. And I think, professionally, whatever that is, or at least as a yoga teacher, doing the things I'm doing and continuing to learn as much as I can, and getting to retreats when I can, and all that kind of stuff. And and getting this podcast out there and up to the next level, and like Derek said, like just building the community of guys. And I think really trying to demystify what yoga is for a lot of guys. That's what I do on the Yoga for Dudes platform. And you realize, coming off of your weekend and coming off of the weekend I did with Brian Kest and just teaching on a regular basis, like people don't move, man. They just do not move.
Yeah.
And, I grabbed a lot of stuff from your weekend. I think I mentioned to you, I know I told Tim, a lot of stuff on the back I've been throwing into classes ever since then. And it's so simple, and yet it's extremely effective and powerful. And people, they sit back up after they get off their back and are like, oh my God, my shoulders, like, whoa, from doing that. And you're like, yeah. And you see the ones that breathe, you see the people that come in and they're like fired up and they're like, yeah, I want to vinyasa flow and a thing. You're like, okay, so just lay on your back and breathe. Can you breathe for 60 minutes? Let's try that. And inevitably they hold their breath most of the time. And then you get like the person who's just into it and listening and they're going to go for it. And I asked them, just make the personal commitment to yourself to breathe for 60 minutes. You'll be shocked.
Yeah.
And so you realize people aren't breathing. They're not moving. They're not breathing. They're not taking care of themselves. And I'm a victim of that as well, because we all have our seasons, when things are working, man. So I guess for me, try to keep a season of goodness, stay out of the season of the witch as long as I can,
Oh, listen,
get to more concerts too.
Yeah.
That's
right.
another one.
That's right. Johnny, always great having you on. We know you got to jump, so I just want to make sure I got this right. The next Way of the Empowered Man retreat at Kripalu is Friday, January 31st through Sunday, February 2nd.
Right. Yeah. It is the weekend before the AFC and NFC finals and the Super Bowl before the Eagles win the Super Bowl.
Perfect way to get yourself aligned for whoever your team is.
Yeah, so boys, it is the weekend before,
not the Giants.
There you go. Before the Eagles win the Super Bowl. So
and
there you go.
let's tease it also, Derek, with letting people know that the weekend we went up to Kripalu for this workshop, this was the highest attended men's workshop at Kripalu ever.
18 guys, everything from a D1 football player, right? D1 University of Delaware football player to there was one guy that was almost like 70 years old that just retired. That was pretty strapping, pretty good shape, that dude. Right.
Totally.
And everybody in the middle, and everybody was cool, and it was a good time, so that's it, man. I'm stoked, man. And you know what? You guys are, one shout out before we get off. You guys are doing great work. You're doing God's work, right? You're trying to get out there and you're trying to help guys. And I see both of you, and I see all of the energy and effort you're putting into it. and it's all from your heart, and I appreciate it so much. And just keep doing it, man. Just keep doing it.
Thank you, Johnny.
Excellent.
We
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank you.
that.
Yeah.